Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa will today host Ukrainian President Volodmyr Zelenskyy for a working visit focused on efforts to end the ongoing war in Ukraine. The meeting comes amid growing global calls for a resolution to the three-year-long conflict between Russia as well as Ukraine. According to the presidency, talks between the two leaders will also center on potential areas of cooperation to help bring lasting peace to the war-torn country. Let's speak to the Department of International Relations and Cooperation spokesperson, Chrispin Phiri. Mr. Phiri, appreciate the time then. Thank you so much for it. It's ultimately a big one with regards to this visit. Why don't you just help us detail just some parts of the day, if you will, then, and the significance of this visit for both South Africa and perhaps what your colleagues from the Ukrainian side perhaps would share in this conversation as well.
Thank you very much, and good morning to our Newzroom Afrika viewers. Indeed, it's a significant visit. We do think that this is the first visit by a head of state from the Ukraine, so it's quite significant in that respect. President Zelenskyy landed early in the late evening of last night and was welcomed by Minister Lamula. What we do expect today, of course, is a number of discussions to take place. What our viewers may not be aware of is that we have a 31-year-old relationship with a country like Ukraine. Since its independence in 1992, we recognized it and we then formed diplomatic relations. Soon after that, I think on the 16th of March, if that date does not elude me, in 1992. So we have a long-standing bilateral relationship with the Ukrainians. And we also have a budding Ukrainian diaspora community in South Africa. So Ukraine remains a very important country to South Africa. And this visit will definitely look at some forms of cooperation, even at an economic level. But certainly we will touch on the conflict that we are seeing in the eastern parts of the Ukraine. You would recall, Arabile, and some of our viewers, that in 2023, on the 16th of June, President Ramaphosa visited Kyiv, where he, with other African leaders, 5 other African leaders, presented the African Peace Initiative, where one of the main pillars of that dialogue was that, or of the initiative was that rather, this conflict should be resolved through diplomatic means and not through an escalation of violence. And a number of other key pillars were presented in that peace initiative by President Ramaphosa and other African leaders as well. So this is a continuum in many ways of that discussion as well, where we will be able to explore whether some of those initiatives that were proposed then are finding traction. And to some extent, we can definitely say, yes, they are finding traction. We are now seeing, for example, the United States insisting that Russia should also be at the table for discussions around these negotiations. And we've seen some form of such shuttle diplomacy from Washington to Russia. We will also continue to include Ukraine in these discussions. So in essence, what we are seeing is a full implementation of our non-alignment policy, but also in some ways a real escalation of diplomacy instead of war.
This ultimately means that the conversations between the two countries have ultimately fostered better relations over the years, over the 31 years, as you make note of. Does this mean that, and you've just been speaking about it, but I want to just harp on it a little bit more. Does this mean that we can effect some sort of change in the invasion of Ukraine by Russia?
We would believe that we can continue advocating for a conflict resolution that results in peace, a long-lasting peace. And you know, often people underestimate the impact of a country like South Africa in processes like this. But we have a well-established track record of really resolving and really influencing these type of conflicts to result in a negotiated settlement because of our own history. We really do believe that our history is instructive in that regard. So we do believe that ultimately we will be able to continue advocating for a process where we are seeing less harmful actions on civilians, and more humanitarian aid being facilitated in areas of conflict, and in this case as well in the Ukraine, the eastern parts of Ukraine, ensuring that the children who are caught in this conflict are ultimately facilitated back to the appropriate processes, but also right back to their families where they belong. All of those initiatives are initiatives that South Africa is very actively taking part in. And also, ultimately, what this must result in, Arabile, is that the United Nations Charter must be respected and it must be implemented by all nations. And I think that is a principle that we continue to stand by, where we say that the sovereign and territorial integrity of states must be respected and must be promoted. And we do believe that, the United Nations Charter is not a menu that we can pick from and choose whatever principle we think applies. We must apply it consistently, and all of its principles must be very vehemently adhered to.
Chrispin, is there any concern within the Department of International Relations then that this visit in itself could actually create some ire, some disgruntlement perhaps then with the U.S. Administration in office right now, which of course is having in itself a bit of a issue, I suppose, with South Africa?
There's a famous saying, Arabile, that the former president of India once coined, and also President Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, and that is, we are not the plaything of others. So we conduct our diplomacy in the interests of what we believe is in the best interest of South Africa and in the best interest of what principles we are advancing and what our national interests are. And to the extent that we would be in a position to ensure that there's long-lasting peace in the world, that is a foreign policy pursuit that we believe is something we should pursue. We're anti-war wherever it arises, and we require no explanations or justifications to anyone around why we believe war does not further development in the world. In fact, one of the fundamental things that Minister Lamola often says is that it seems in this world, it's much easier to fund wars than development. There's more development in the world, whether it's in the eastern parts of the Ukraine or whether it's on the African continent.